So welcome to this, which will be our final video before the initial submission, and I'll send you some information about that at the beginning of next week. So what I'd like to do now is just set up an exercise where we can try and apply some of the ideas that we've seen from all the various authors. First of all, your responses to the remainder of Cobley were fine, so we have a good sense now, I think, of the directions taken in narratology since 2000 to pretty much this point historically. So it would be useful just to think, to almost complete the cycle and return to first principles and ask the question, how compact, just how reduced can any narrative form be? What would be the most compressed or concentrated form of a narrative utterance that would still be recognized as a story? And if we think about one of the things we read, it was a reference made to the English novelist around the Second World War and subsequently called E.M. Forster. And Forster said that, well, if you utter the phrase, the king died, then the queen died, that is not a narrative. But if you utter the phrase, the king died, then the queen died of grief, that certainly is a narrative. And the reason he gave for that was, well, it's a causal sequence. There are agents, there is a causal sequence through which we can establish the sort of story discourse impetus that that particular compressed narrative embodies. So I will send you another narrative which will actually trim some of the excess from that. So I'll send you that in the accompanying email to this video. But what I'd like to do now is pose a series of questions that will relate to that particular narrative. So I'll send you the narrative. Resist, if you can, the temptation to look it up on the internet beyond a few cursory details, perhaps. Try not to go for meaning, maybe look at where it might have come from, but resist the temptation to think the internet holds all the clues, because it doesn't. We'll have plenty that we can bring to it. That's a possibility, but here are some questions. I'm going to ask 7 questions. So the narrative will be contained in the email. Here are my 7 questions about it. Question number 1. What is the genre of this narrative? What genre is this narrative? Question 2. And now we're thinking a little bit about Jeanette. Who was the actual author of this narrative? So this is where you can use the internet. And who is the actual reader? So question 2, who is the actual author and who is the actual reader? So we're thinking about Jeanette. Question 3, what is the form of the narrative? So I'm trying to separate out that often easy to confuse relationship between genre, the type of narrative, as opposed to the actual formal layout. And obviously this is relevant to music. So what is the form of this narrative? How many parts is it in? Really, that's what I'm asking. How many parts is this narrative in? Question 4, can we interpret who is the protagonist, who is the antagonist, and who is the witness who learns? Who are these agents in this particular case? The protagonist, the antagonist, and the witness who learns. Question 5. We learned a little bit about the Greek word peripeteia. You'll remember that it means reversal of fortune. Hillis Miller spoke about this, the sense in which a narrative takes one trajectory, then it perhaps turns into something else, which can either be redemptive, and that happened in the case of the Brahms song, or it could be tragic. So is there a sense of peripeteia, of reversal of fortune in the narrative that I've sent you? Question 6. That idea of peripeteia might also be linked to the concepts of story and discourse that we have explored. So rather than ask a question about those, here is my question 6. Given what the narrative seems to state, is it explicitly gendered? Is it gendered in any meaningful sense? Do we get a sense of what the sort of gendered implications might be in terms of male, female? If so, why? So that's question 6. Is the story, the narrative, gendered in any meaningful way? And the last question, question 7. We thought about the meaning of temporality, which we've discovered from pretty much every author is central to what we're thinking about, and that's why narrative studies in music is so suggestive, which is because music is a time-bound art. So we think about the levels of temporality that Heidegger proposed, that Paul Ricoeur spoke about. We have elemental time at the deep level, we have the now time of everyday fabric, but we also have the sense of what history is. And if you remember, that is care for the future. So here's my question 7. Does this narrative project a pessimistic or an optimistic narrative frame or message? Does it project an optimistic or a pessimistic narrative message? Okay, so that's all I want to say for now. So I'll send you a couple of things, the narrative itself and also an accompanying image in an email, and that'll give you some information as well about when to turn things around. Really by, say, Friday, something like 12 noon would be handy, and then I can send you things for Monday, which will just set up the first submission. By the way, I'll allow at least 10 days for that, so you've no need to worry about turning something around within a week. If we think about next Monday, will be the 13th of April, I'm probably looking at the 22nd of April for a submission then. So not until Wednesday, I think it will be the 22nd of April. All right, very good. Thanks very much. I will just terminate and save this narrative, and hopefully it'll come together with a link which is reliable this time. I had a problem with one of the other classes, Carl knows. But yeah, hopefully this will be a useful exercise just to put some ideas together to help synthesize all of the various sources and critical viewpoints that we've been thinking about. Okay, bye for now.